Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to talk to you about is quite seriously the most important issue facing the whole of humanity. It's not the stock market crash, I'm afraid. It's really something much more serious than that. We humans are facing the greatest crisis of our entire million-year existence on this planet. This is the Earth emergency. It's the direct result of compounding threats to the health of both planet and people created by human actions over the last half century or so. There is presently no plan by any nation or international body to tackle the Earth emergency in all its aspects. We urgently need one. Every other issue is a distraction from the mounting danger to our own survival. What we have is a chaotic road to avoidable disaster, driven by 10 vast interconnected threats, which are all the result of human activity. These threats have been carefully documented by science worldwide over more than 60 years. They show that the human capacity to inflict mass harm on ourselves, on our health and our well-being, and that of the planet as a whole, has increased exponentially since the middle of the last century. Collectively, they menace the future of human civilization, and certainly our health and our ability to survive. They are all driven at core by the same four factors: overpopulation, overconsumption, overpollution, and money. The science is in. We've wiped out 3/4 of all large animals in just a few decades. Studies show that extinction rates are now about 1,000 times above the normal levels that apply on Earth generally. Human beings and our livestock now make up 96% of all life on land. We're destroying forests, wetlands, grasslands, and ocean life at rates never before seen, and we are creating new deserts, toxic and uninhabitable regions. The extinction process that's going on now is in actual fact 3 times faster than the process that took out the dinosaurs, believe it or not. Now, so ecological collapse threatens humans as well as wildlife. It's not just about nature. It's really very much about us. We are in effect collapsing the life support system of the Earth, the thing that keeps us going. We're losing fresh water, topsoil, fish, forests, and other vital resources at shocking rates. Human consumption of materials is skyrocketing. It was about 29 billion tonnes a year for the whole of humanity back in the 1970s. Today, it's 120 billion tonnes, heading for 150 by the middle of this century. All those resources come at a huge cost to our own health and well-being because of the damage and pollution that they cause. There is already a world freshwater crisis affecting half the world's population. That is a major health crisis too, and it can only grow more severe. There's a crisis in our farming soils that nobody wants to acknowledge. We're felling forests and clearing land as if there was no tomorrow, which may become the case. And we are killing large parts of the ocean. The ocean's actually losing its oxygen at the moment, as well as a large number of dead zones arising around the place. Now, just to give you a feel for how each one of us affects this, that picture shows the salt lakes in the Andes in Chile. They used to be covered in flamingos. You can see about 2 or 3 flamingos in that picture. The reason that there are no flamingos is that the water has been drained to be used in processing the lithium that powers the battery that runs your phone, your electric vehicle, your chainsaw, whatever it is. So with our indiscriminate use of electrical items alone, we are mining water around the planet and destroying ecosystems like this one, which have been there for millions of years. Soil loss, note down there, we're losing about 45 to 75 billion tonnes of topsoil every year. That's the stuff that grows our food. So that's just going away on the wind and with the rain, and down the rivers and into the oceans, down to the bottom of the ocean where we can never use it again. Forests are being felled at around about 25 million hectares a year. There is some let up in that, and in some places they're putting the forests back, but places like the Amazon are being clear felled like there's no tomorrow. We're wasting over 1 billion tons of food a year. That's just outrageous in this society, especially when there's 800 million people who haven't got enough food. About a third of the fisheries on Earth are completely unsustainable. They're starting to collapse, in other words. So we can't just keep on hauling fish out of the ocean at the rate we've been going. And the bottom line is that humans now overshoot the Earth's resources. We basically use up the renewable resources of the planet Earth in 7 months. For 12 months worth of resources are used up in 7 months. So we're consuming far more of the Earth than it can possibly provide us with in the long run. And these things are going to catch up with us. We're poisoning everyone and everything on the planet every single day, especially our children. They come into a toxic world. In fact, most children are born with already carrying a cargo of carcinogens and toxicants in the embryo, in the womb. And then when they take their first sip of their mother's milk, what do they get? Pesticide. So really we're not thinking about our kids at all. Our society is awash with chemicals. I've calculated that we produce around about 200 billion tons of chemicals from all forms of human activity. That's not just manufacturing, but that's also things like construction, agriculture, mining, and so on. All of these chemicals are let loose. Many of them are toxic, and they are having a huge effect on our health. And that chemical output is going to double by the 2030s, which is not far away. The World Health Organization tells us that around about 14 million people, that is 1 in every 4 human beings, now die as a result of toxicity in their environment. That's in their air, their water, their food, their home, their workplace. I mean, we're just swimming in these things and in the mixtures that they create and doing very little indeed to quell them. I argue that this killing 14 million people a year, which is very much worse than the Holocaust in World War II, is the greatest act of preventable homicide that humans have ever committed. And it's downright time that we did prevent it. Now, can we see the evidence of this? Absolutely. Brain diseases worldwide are now pandemic and out of control. So we've seen things like autism, ADHD, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and so forth, a whole host of diseases that weren't very common previously in previous generations are now becoming much more common. 1 person in every 8 suffers from a mental condition worldwide now, and the human intelligence has actually declined by 13 points since 1975. So we're losing about 1.5 IQ points every decade at the moment. And it's you can see what's happening in our politics, in our behavior, our social behavior, and the things that are going on around us. We're just not as bright as our parents. This is something that has got to be fixed. Okay, well, we all know about the nuclear situation. According to the Chicago group, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, we are now the closest to nuclear catastrophe that we've ever been since Hiroshima, basically. There's still 12,300 warheads in the world arsenal. That's less than there were in the past. But look, you only need 50 or 100 nukes to start a nuclear winter, and a nuclear winter would take out the food supply. It would kill about 2 billion people. So even a very small, limited, local nuclear war could actually affect every country on Earth by destroying, their food crops, rice, wheat, corn, and so on. 9 nations worldwide now have the capacity to do this to us. And they are developing ever deadlier weapons systems. many of which are powered by AI and over which basically humans are no longer in charge. The AI may decide to launch a nuclear war all on its own. And if you think that that's a fictional scenario, it's not. And there have been over 30 situations in the last 50, 60 years in which we came to the brink of nuclear war because of some technical malfunction in the early warning system and so forth. The world has discarded most of its nuclear treaties, and we're looking at this growing technological dysfunction that's carrying on. Now, 2/3 of nations want nuclear weapons to be banned, but 1/3 of nations want to keep them. That is, 1/3 of the world's countries support nuclear war. Most women want nuclear weapons banned, but most men think they're okay. Why is that, one wonders? Now, as everybody knows, we're shaping a climate that will render the Earth largely uninhabitable within a few generations. Heating emissions are still rising strongly. That's CO2, methane, and all the other greenhouse gases, despite talk about constraining them. Those are going to take us past +2 degrees by 2050. And they're going to take us to 4 degrees by 2100. And I know this doesn't sound much, but take it from me. I've been writing about farming and agriculture for over 50 years. At those levels, farming and agriculture become impossible. So the food supply disappears. At +3 to +4 degrees, it becomes impossible to farm because farming is all taking place, or nearly all taking place, outdoors. So we're moving into a situation where we could collapse the world food supply if we don't look out. Plenty of things we can do about it, but we've got to take on board the warning signs now. Now, our total carbon emissions are around about 42 billion tonnes a year, and they are rising at record rates. So we're on a business as usual strategy, in spite of all the pledges of governments around the world. And we've got to the point where the Earth is now generating its own heat. So all that carbon that was locked up in the tundra, on the seabed, in the tropical swamps that are catching fire now, that's going back up into the atmosphere and heating the planet. And it's not being absorbed by the oceans at anything like the rates it should be any longer. So there's 3 to 5 trillion tonnes of carbon locked up in natural resources, and they are being let loose now by the planet itself as we cook it up. So this is a process that we actually cannot stop. Humans will have no control. If it gets out of hand, there's nothing we can do about it. So we need to stop it happening now. And then we've got technology. Look, there's been a lot of talk about it, but the problem is climate change is the result of a very benign technology, burning coal and oil, that got out of hand because there was just too much of it going on. Agriculture is a very benign technology, but it's cut down all the forests, and it's the main driver of extinction worldwide. So you can see how a very good, promising technology, if it's not properly controlled and supervised, can get out of hand and cause a major threat. Well, that's true of AI, which is not being supervised by anybody at the moment. It's just at the whim of the tech bros. Universal surveillance, that's the spying on every human being at the moment, the technological surveillance that goes on your computer or your iPhone. Man-made plagues. Well, there is a lot of evidence now that COVID started in a laboratory. The scientists are starting to really take this seriously. Why? Because there are 30 experiments going on right now worldwide to try to turn wild viruses into more deadly pathogens of human beings. So we're creating more deadly plagues. Now, I cannot understand why, but there is no ethical oversight of these man-made, of these activities in the lab, which is a disgrace. Nano pollution. You're inhaling tiny particles which are going into your blood, into your brain, into your children, and so forth. Killer robots. We know about killer robots. They make their own minds up about who they kill, and they can get off the hook. And we're putting everybody in megacities. I mean, Don't get me wrong, cities are a great idea, a great invention, but they're terribly fragile because all of their food comes from outside and their water and everything else. No megacity can support itself if it's isolated from its surrounding environment. So megacities themselves are a terrible point of vulnerability for human beings. Now, food. I mentioned before, we currently throw away nearly half our food, and then we wreck the planet trying to grow more. That means half of our farmers are farming their little hearts out to feed nobody, which is disgraceful, because that food is going through to landfill or compost in some cases, but mostly to landfill. So that's a terrible waste. Our agricultural system is a system of terrible waste. Now, the essential things that are controlling it are the fact that there's 110,000 more people going to sit down to dinner tonight than sat down last night. So the human population is still ballooning. It's not just babies being born, it's also old folks like myself living longer lives than we would otherwise normally have lived. It's about rich people who, on the whole, on average, eat 35,000 more meals than do poor people in the course of their lives. It's about meat demand in developing countries soaring to match meat demand in countries like America and Australia. All of this is going to double global demand for food by the middle of this century. But on the other hand, as I mentioned, we're running out of water. 3/4 of the world's water, or 2/3 to 3/4, is used to grow our food. So if we run out of water, we run out of food as well. We've passed peak land. The world agricultural area is actually shrinking now. And of course, we are losing topsoil at these unsustainable rates. So the soils we used to farm very successfully are disappearing under our feet. We're getting limited on the major nutrients like phosphorus and things like that. We've already passed peak fish. The fisheries are starting to contract in the oceans. We're not investing in new agricultural science at anything like the rates we used to do. And of course, climate is rolling down. I mean, agriculture is terribly vulnerable to climate. So all of that is now starting to weigh very heavily on our ability to feed ourselves. And somehow governments keep on ignoring this. They just assume the food will always be there in the supermarket. Well, take it from me, it won't. If agriculture falls over, then governments fall over as well. So really that's the scenario that we're looking at if we don't take a lot of care. I'm going to offer you the solutions to all of these problems later in this talk, just in case you think this is a bit doom and gloom. I'm just giving you the scientific facts at the moment. So food security is the Achilles heel of modern civilization, and governments do not get that. There's an urgent need to completely rethink the way we produce food, because using a Stone Age technology like agriculture is not going to feed a 21st century hot world that's overpopulated. The world population has tripled in my lifetime. Every year we're cramming another 80 million people into lifeboat Earth. And this is driving all of the other threats. This is behind a huge demands on the planet and the rate at which we're ploughing through its resources. However, and this is a very positive sign, human fertility is also declining in most countries. Why? Because women are having or choosing to have fewer babies. And they're making that decision, not men. So women are actually showing us a lead. They have understood that overpopulation is a threat and it's going to hit us sooner or later. And they're trying to reduce the population right now. And if all things being equal, provided everybody can get access to food and access to water and access to healthcare and so forth, the human population can come down quite quickly. So, it's not a one-way street. And we don't need the sort of populations that the billionaire bros talk about. They're just being greedy. If you talk to the scientists and you ask them what is a stable, sustainable human population, most of the science that I have read, the scientists I've spoken to, say around about 2 or 3 billion people, which is what the world population was in the 2050s, sorry, in the 1950s. So if you wind the clock back 75 years, that's basically a stable, sustainable human population at today's levels of consumption. So that just gives you an idea of what the Earth can carry and what it is carrying at the moment, 8.2 going to 10 or 11. It's way overstocked. And if you talk to any farmer about what happens if you put 1,000 cattle in a field that is designed to carry 250 cattle, they all die of starvation very quickly. That's what happens there. And the Earth is going the same way. Okay, well, I've already mentioned pandemic diseases. There have been 7 pandemics since 2000, and there's mounting concern now about an 8th, which is the transfer of avian flu to humans. That could be very deadly because certain versions of avian flu affect the brain and the central nervous system, and they kill chickens real quick, and they kill humans real quick too if they start spreading the same way. So avian flu, if it got loose in humans and was transferable human to human, would be a lot worse than COVID, a lot worse. So we need to be alert and aware about that. We also need to understand that infectious disease is driven by human behavior. And what are the main behaviors that produce a lot of infectious disease? Well, the short answer is overpopulation, destruction of the environment, because most of these new diseases, a lot of the flus, HIV, hantaviruses, Ebola, Marburg, they all come out of the jungle. They're resident in bats or monkeys or something else. They only get into humans when humans cut the jungle down. Megacities. What a megacity is like a bioreactor. It's bringing a huge number of people together in one giant compost heap, and that allows them to spread diseases much more efficiently. Travel. It only takes 24 hours for a new disease to go from one side of the world to the other. So the fact that we're moving 1.5 billion human beings around the planet every year is a hell of a good way to spread infectious disease. So we've really got to start thinking about, does my right to travel include a right to kill other people? Because that's what's happening at the moment. And the other driver I've mentioned, bad science. There's some pretty bad science out there that's tinkering with new viruses in ways that should not be happening. The World Health Organization says, look, if we don't get on top of this problem, new worse plagues are likely. Well, I think that's pretty obvious. They've been happening ever since the Black Death or the measles epidemic back in the 3rd century, or whatever it was that took out the ancient Athenians. You find a bunch of people, a new disease comes in from outside, and they're all vulnerable to it because their immune systems are unprepared for it. Now, the other issue that really is affecting our society in a bad way at the moment is misinformation. We lie constantly and continually to ourselves about all these threats. The scientists publish them in the scientific literature, and then a whole lot of politicians and corporations and people like that just get up and deny it. Why, I've got no idea, but they simply don't care. But mass delusion and disinformation now inundate our societal discourse around the world. This is not just happening in America. It's happening in Britain. It's happening in Australia. It's happening in China. It's everywhere at the moment. Bullshit is being spread, across the internet. There's good stuff on the internet. Don't get me wrong. There's truth and things like that, but there's also an enormous quantity of bullshit, and unfortunately, a less intelligent human race doesn't have the ability to tell the difference. So people swallow this stuff. And in fact, there have now arisen several kinds of media that specialize in telling lies because they've discovered there's a percentage of the populace that enjoys being lied to for whatever reason. They just want to believe these fantasies about society. But let me tell you this, misinformation will destroy government, You cannot have a democracy if nobody knows what is true and what isn't. You know, it will destroy that. It'll probably destroy the economy as well, because again, claims cannot be validated or refuted. So really, this is a very dangerous trend for humans to deceive ourselves, and we need to do something about it. Right, well, the real point I want to make is that these 10 threats, you cannot solve them one at a time because they're all interconnected. They're joined together by the fact that they're driven by overpopulation, by overconsumption, by overpollution, and those things. So if you try to fix one of them, chances are you will end up making other ones worse. So we have to come up with solutions that work across the board. All 10 of these major catastrophic risks have to be solved at the same time. And that means we have to change our behavior. We have to eat differently. We have to house ourselves differently. We have to produce things differently than we have in the past. We can't go on being 19th century or Stone Age humans in a modern world. We have to adapt, as humans are very good at doing. So basically, all of these things have solutions, right? And we need to get on with solving them, because at the moment, our governments are not doing it. But let me make this point. If you want to solve a problem, you first have to understand it. You cannot solve that problem if you do not know how it has arisen. So understanding this issue and understanding the major factors that I have just mentioned is an absolutely critical part, and sharing this understanding with one another and developing solutions. I've written several books about this, but the most recent is How to Fix a Broken Planet. It contains the actual solutions, not only what should be done by governments, but what every one of us can do in our own lives to make this a safer, more habitable world for our children and grandchildren.